I'm just going to kind of show off some of the main features of Hub, how I use it and how I think about it, how we use it at user interviews, hopefully show some tricks or answer some questions. Um, Tucker, you're going to keep us on track, right? Make sure we get to everything. And
That's exactly right, JH.
cool. All right, let me share my screen. Get set up here. Awesome. Can everyone, so I got that. Can I still see the chat? I wonder. I guess not.
I'll monitor for us, JH.
Okay. Cool. So what we're going to cover today is our product Research Hub. I'll probably just call it Hub for most of it. So if you hear me say Hub, that's what I'm talking about. And really, we can start with kind of the basics of like, what is it? And we think of it as like the backbone of conducting research with your own users. What I mean by that is whenever you talk to users through our site and schedule them and pay them incentives and all of that sort of stuff, it automatically all pulls up here into this one master kind of repository or database where a couple of the critical pieces of information are going to just get tracked automatically. And so you're going to know when they got added to your population, their email, what other information they collect from them. But more interestingly, when they've been last invited to a study, when they last applied to a study, or when they last participated in a study, along with the incentives they've earned, either overall or in a given year, and whether they've unsubscribed. That is basically the stuff that comes out of the box. So I'm showing, for the purposes of this demo, an environment that's a little lived in with some real data or real fake data. But if you were to show up here brand new, a couple of these columns, data added, last invited, last participated, these ones are just kind of out of the box. And what we find is really useful for that, and what teams find a lot of value out of, is basically not overfishing the same users in your user base. So if Tucker, reached out and contacted demo participant recently, when I'm going to find people that I need to invite for my study, I have that information available to me, and then I can decide if I also want to invite them to my own. So kind of that rate limiting and being smart about not over contacting people is really helpful.
JH, how does the UI system have this data? Like, how do we know when someone was last invited to a project?
Yeah, here, I'll open up another tab. So when you're running projects through us, so this is a project with, with our own users. Basically, any interaction that a user has with this project is just getting logged in the background. And then we aggregate it across all of your team's projects. So we know when this person was invited to this project, when they applied to this project, when they completed the project. And then if they had done that across any other projects, we are just able to aggregate that all into this one singular place. And so you don't have to start from this view necessarily. Like I said, this is kind of the backbone. You could start by building and launching a project, inviting people to it. And then after the fact, you'd be able to come in here and see this information populated based on all that activity that happened on that project. So these fields, like I said, are just kind of like by default and automatic, and not necessarily how you might start. Like if you just need to talk to people, you might just come in and start a new project, come in here with your own users. Say you have a CSV or a list of users from an analyst in your company who used a certain feature or signed up in a certain window. You could come in and just get straight to it in terms of like, I want to talk to them one-on-one, upload that list right here, set up the details of how long the session is going to be and how many people you need to speak to, all that sort of stuff. If you're uploading, you can do kind of like a mail merge and customize that. We'll do this in more detail. I'm kind of flying through, but the cool part is that I think a lot of people come in with a specific need of, I need to schedule some people for this research project or this design, this question we're trying to answer, whatever it may be. You can just start that way and not worry about this view, and that data will still just automatically populate after the fact. So that's, again, kind of the nice aspect of it is you get some of that tracking and that data collection just in the course of using the product normally. You don't have to like be mindful of it. Cool. Yeah, so that's the basic kind of premise of Hub. And then I was just going to kind of run through different ways of using it. So the biggest thing really is how do you get people in here? And so we can cover a couple different paths. As I mentioned, when you're creating a project, you have the optional step of uploading people here. which is as simple as, grabbing a list of users. All you have to have in the file is an email address. So like if you want to have, you can see my file has a bunch of columns: first name, last name, email, account ID. So if you want to load in that extra kind of like contextual metadata on your users, obviously it's really helpful. And we tend to do that. You can do that. But the only required field is email. So you could just have a list of emails, load it, mail them, and that's as simple as it can get. A couple tricks you might want to do are when you're importing a list, is to put a label that like somehow tells you about what that upload was. So maybe you want to do like 61020, project one upload, whatever, like something that would be useful to your team. So each team's going to have kind of their own nomenclature or syntax about how they might want to do that. But that way you'll know that everybody was imported in this batch, and you can find them easily later off of that label. So that's a good trick. And you can basically map things in your CSV to fields in our system. And so if the fields already exist, like I said, I'm showing an instance that's a little bit lived in. You can just go ahead and pick, first name goes to first name, last name goes to last name. These don't have to line up. So like if I didn't have a column header, or we called this last instead of last name, you can just do the mapping regardless. And then in the case of like, say you have a field that's not in here already, like favorite color, you can always make a new field as well. So you can go ahead and kind of get whatever information you need to do in here. I'm not going to do that at the moment, just to kind of keep our demo instance clean. But so importing in the creation of, in the process of creating a project is one option. Another option is once the project is live, you always have the option to invite more people to that project. One of the easiest ways is each project has its own unique link. And you can just grab that link and then send it to your users however you like. So if you have a customer support team that's on the front lines with users, and is going to be able to identify people who are using certain features or whatever, you could give them this link, and then as they find people who are a good fit, they could send it to them for you. You could blast it out in marketing campaigns. You could do your own mail merge, whatever you want. So this is a pretty flexible way to get people in here. You can upload after the fact as well. So if you decided you didn't have the list ready when you were making the project, you can always come back and do that step now. Same sort of thing. You just select the file, map the fields, and go. And then lastly, you can invite from Hub itself. So if you don't care who you get and you just want to say like, give me a random slice, you can just hit this button and then just say, which project. And so I'm doing my continuous research project. And then you can just say, of the 27, how many do you want to invite? And you can just type in 15. And we'll just grab a random 15 from your list and go ahead and invite them to that project. So, in the case of 27, it's probably easier to go through and handpick who's a good fit. But if this was 2,700 or something, it might be easier to just go in and say, give me 200 people. And do it that way. And so that was the random invite option. And you can also select people and, invite individual people. So if I like Robert and I like Katie, I can just go ahead and select them in particular and then decide to invite them from here. So there's a handful of options of how you can do it. That I'll touch on now is what we call opt-in forms. And this is a nice solution if you want to build up your audience or your panel in a more kind of passive way. And what we have here is a form where you can kind of give it a title, a description of what people are getting into by signing up to this. There's a handful of those default fields that I mentioned in terms of first name, last name, phone number. Email is the only required one. And then you can create a bunch of your own custom questions to capture data from users and populate that table for you. So you can map these fields to those columns. And so if it's important for you to know what kind of device do you use? Do you have an iOS device or an Android device? Because maybe you have two different apps. Like you can ask those types of questions from your users as they join the opt-in form or as they opt in. And then you have that data to filter on and target later. So again, this is a great way to create this form once, get the link, and then distribute it out through various channels. Maybe it's part of your sign-up flow or one of your welcome emails like PS. If you're interested in giving us feedback, please sign up here. Customer support distribution is a great idea. Sales, similar. And yeah, so let me just show a little bit about like how you'd add a question. So, if you wanted to ask something around the mobile OS, right? It's, there's one in here that's already been set up. So like, not the best example. I can make one from scratch, but like, what is the primary, mobile operating system you use? And this is one where I'd probably want them to just pick one. And so I'd probably actually go ahead and list out the options of, iOS, and by other in this case.
Not a lot to choose from there in the operating system world.
I don't know. Is Windows Phone still around? Maybe. I don't know. Right, but you can do it that way. If you want to make a brand new question that is, doesn't map to a field you already have, you got an idea for me, Tucker? Any?
Who's your favorite user interviews employee? Is there a popular one?
I'm trying to do one to be a good multi-select of, favorite foods or something, right? And a little bit of a thing that's not the most intuitive, this is a usability issue we know we need to fix, is if you want it to be a multi-select, you actually select the field type of text. And so I'll show you how this works in a second. So favorite foods, I'm gonna give people a list of foods to check off. So new field, favorite foods, text, save it. And then when I come in here, I'll say, which of these foods do you like? And then in here, I can say pick any, and then I could say, I don't know, doesn't need to be plural, I suppose. Apple. This is a weird list of foods, but
it's very New England of you, JH.
Yeah, cranberry. So whatever would be applicable, and then you can save it, and then you can also preview this, so you can come through and take a look at like what it's going to look like for your users, and so you can see it's a very simple form. You name this and that, and like I said, the cool thing here is we can actually go through and just do a quick one, right? Like we'll fill it out.
So attendees, what JH is showing us now is that by filling out this opt-in form and answering these questions, all of this data is automatically going to get pulled into your research hub, into your own panel. And of course, because we've captured the data within our own form, we'll also know the date that JH joined the panel automatically. Yeah, sorry, I actually, you can't submit it in preview mode. We're smart like that, but if we want to see how this works, I can just do it like this. So let me actually submit this so we can see the data come through. And there's a couple other features that are not visible in here that I'll show how to set up in a second. One is branding. So you can put your logo on this form. So I'll show you how to set that up in a second and then what that looks like. And then the other one is what we call data consent. So basically, if there are terms or conditions that you need your users to agree to in terms of submitting their information to the system or participating in research with you, you can spell that out as a kind of disclaimer. There'll be a checkbox that they have to acknowledge to actually submit their information. And then that way you'll have that from a compliance standpoint. So I'll show you those two features next, but just for now, I'll submit this. So they're added. And when I come back here, let me go back to Hub. So you can see that now this new user who just submitted shows up. I didn't include a phone number. I've never been invited because I'm brand new, no incentives. I haven't unsubscribed. And then you can see some of my answers. So my business name was Acme Corp. I agreed to this. I put in lobster, apple, rice is my favorite foods. I use iOS. And so that's how that comes through. And what's cool, right, is because this comes in custom fields, you can go into favorite foods and then, say contains and then find everyone who likes apple, right? And so in this case, since it's a new question with a new field, there's only one user in here, but the benefit of this, right, is if you're collecting all this data, you can easily then filter on it, grab the people who answered a certain way, and then invite them to a project. So if you needed iOS users, you could grab everyone that uses iOS and invite them to whatever project you need. So opt-in form is something that we've seen teams have a ton of success with in terms of adopting it as like a org-wide way to passively build up their participant pool.
The trick with that is just, aligning with your teammates and figuring out what are the right questions to ask, because you want to find the balance of capturing meaningful, useful information to target on from your users, but also not putting them through a form that is, overwhelming. So, and it's nice if you have kind of consistent data across your users to target on. The last one I'll touch on in terms of getting people into the system, there's kind of two schools of thought that we hear from our users. One is, as I mentioned earlier, I have a project. I just need to talk to some people to get feedback on this new design or whatever. And they jump right into the project. They have a list of people and they just go. Other people are approaching it, other teams are approaching it from more of we need to build up a panel. We need to build up a list. And so maybe they will seed that with users they know who are interested in giving feedback, in which case you can upload directly here. Again, it's a very similar experience. You're not uploading it to a project, you're just uploading it to your overall database. And so you'll have the same option to come in here and map all the fields and label it if you want, same sort of thing. That's one option. What's a cool option?
You mentioned uploading CSVs to build your hub. Is that a one-time thing, or can I periodically upload CSVs?
You can upload them whenever, and the system is smart about handling people that are already in the system. So if we match everything off of email address, so if like Tucker at User Interviews was already in here from a previous upload or an opt-in or whatever it may be, and then we uploaded a new CSV where Tucker was also in it, it will keep all of his activity data. So like none of this will get affected. So whenever he last participated, whatever incentive he earned, et cetera, stays the same. But if there's any new information in the CSV, it will update or append it to his record. So if we didn't previously have his account created date in here, but the CSV contained that, now that would be updated. If there are other columns that have been added since he joined and we have that information in the CSV, that'll be appended. So at the moment, we don't have any like live integrations across systems, which is something we're definitely thinking a lot about. But if you need to like keep, dates or other information up to date, you could periodically grab a CSV and just re-upload it to refresh that data without affecting any of their, project history or things like that. So it is a useful way to keep this as up to date as you need without having to, worry about losing any of the history. Because if you actually go into a specific person, like you can see this person here, if you click into their profile, you can see a richer view of what they've been up to. So you can see their labels, all that stuff, their time zone, kind of like a summary of their activity on the platform. But you can also see if they've given you previous information on projects. So like in this account settings redesign, this person, answered a bunch of questions. And so by going into their profile, you have that information available and you can see what they've previously reported. So again, none of this would be affected by a new upload. It would just be appending or updating fields that already exist, but it wouldn't be like overwriting any of their project history. Cool. What else do we need to get to, Tucker?
Can we go back into filters and labels, JH, and go a bit deeper there? You mentioned not wanting to overfish. How would I achieve that as a researcher?
Yeah, great question. So the one I usually pay attention to is invited or applied, because you're not always going to schedule everybody who responds to you, and from my personal preference, I don't want to outreach to the same people too many times. So applied is like a nice check. A couple things you want to do here. One is you want to include people without this field set, which means they've never applied. So if they've never applied, you haven't contacted them recently, so you're kind of safe. And then I usually do more than, and like, I think our policy as a team is about 30 days ago. So we don't want people who have, been on a project within the last month. And so when you do this, you get a nice combination of people who have never applied or people who have applied a long time ago. And once you come up with like whatever your team wants to key that off, whether it's participated or applied or invited, and you have it set up the way you want, you can go ahead and save it, right? So,
before you save it, JH, can I combine filters and save them as one?
Yeah. So if you wanted to do that, and you also wanted to make sure that it was anybody who, has earned less than like $600 for, some tax reasons in the US in 2020, you can do it this way. and then that will apply both of those. And so now you're looking at people who have earned less than 600 and have not been contacted or applied for a project recently. So you can go ahead and save that and call this like baseline filters or something, right? So like whatever. And what's nice is that you could then come in and have your team pull up that baseline filter, right? So let me just change it to a different one, right? So you come in, you pull up your baseline. You can just modify it from there. So if you needed, in this case, people who also only used, iOS, you can come through and do that. And now you've kind of cross-referenced all of those. So yeah, it's nice to have like kind of an agreement of like what is your general filter rules and get that saved and set up, and then you can apply additional filters on top of it as needed. You can clear it out and start over as well.
Does everybody on my team have access to these save filters, GH?
Yep. Yeah. So this list is shared across all of your team members. So it is nice if somebody can, somebody goes in and kind of builds up a list of helpful ones, then everyone gets to reap the benefits of that work. And obviously the filters are dynamic. So if today Tucker shows up in the results because he hasn't applied recently, and then today he applies, when I check it tomorrow, he won't be in that filter anymore. So again, the filters apply the rules dynamically every time you load it. So you'll get like a live view of people who meet the criteria that you've set.
Which I know from working with lots of clients in Hub is a huge pain point when you're using a shared spreadsheet. That spreadsheet might contain all the folks that you've reached out to, but you're having to manually update when you invited them, when they applied, when they participated. So a huge value add here in our Hub is that we're dynamically tracking all of those inputs every day.
Yeah, another great one is like the project history filter. So if you want to talk to people who you've already talked to in a previous study to like follow up with them, like maybe you showed them an early iteration of something and you want to see if they prefer the new iteration, you can come through and participate in it and then just select the project name, and you'll get everybody who participated in that project, and so then it's easy to follow up with them. So this is one that people find really helpful. The inverse also being very useful in the sense of we want to make sure we don't talk to people who because we need fresh people for the second version, and so you can just do the inverse of did everyone who did not participate in that same study, and you get the kind of opposite results. And so this is one that also I've seen people use with a lot of success.
Can we look at labels, JH, before we jump to customizing the experience?
Yeah, so there's a couple things you can do with labels. So they live, way off here, but you can filter on labels. So if you wanted to see everyone, that was client A, you can do that. You can also, what's cool if you want, like I mentioned, filters are kind of dynamic in the sense of if Tucker's in that list today, but does something and is gone tomorrow. Labels are more like stamped on the participant. And so if you run a filter, that is whatever you want it to be, I don't know, I can't think of a good example off the top of my head, but like in the results, you can select people and you can just go ahead and add labels to individuals. And so if these three people, match some criteria and you're like, oh, these are all client B people, you can go ahead and just add labels that way as well. So you can add labels in your CSV upload, which is nice if you want to like keep track of where people came from in terms of what the file was or whatever. Or you can select people individually or in mass and then add labels to them that way. And then you can also easily remove labels. So if you came through here and decided that you needed to pull labels off, why is that not showing up? Oh, there it is. You can also, that label is incorrect. You can also pull that off of Brendan. Cool. Trying to think, yeah.
Let's go to customizing the experience. So branding, domain auth.
Yeah, see that. So a couple things. You can, if you need to like rename your columns, whatever, you can do that through edit fields. Same thing with labels. So you have these backup options to do some edits, or you can just dump your database by exporting it. So just good to know options. Customization for your form and things like that actually lives in your team. So the reason for this is this gets applied again across the whole team, and we put your logo or other things into the experience in a number of places to make sure that it's branded for your users as they go out, go throughout it. So this one's super simple. You just, upload a logo. Things with transparent backgrounds tend to work best. Horizontal or square orientations work well. Save it. I'm gonna blame this on demo. Our demo environment gets a little wonky sometimes. So hopefully this goes. Let's see. We might have changed our our AWS credentials for demo or something. So this might be stuck, unfortunately. But you can imagine how that would work. Let me try one more time just to see. Yeah, sorry, I think we have some sort of configuration in our demo environment. But the short answer here is that this is going to go, on top of your opt-in form. So when you come back here, there would be your logo at the top, through any project application links. So when people go through this experience, your logo would be in there, as well as all of the emails that we send. So there's a bunch of emails that you can edit and customize for your users. The invitation kind of being the most obvious. In that email, we'll also put the logo at the top of it to kind of make it look like, a more professional, official email. So that is branding. Sorry for the hiccup there.
On that last screen, Jade, it looks like I can also edit the copy of those emails.
Yeah, so let's touch on that since we're in here. If you're coming through and making a project, the first email you would need to customize is around your invitation. There's a couple things you can customize. Subject, obviously, so you can kind of say whatever is going to resonate with your users best. And then you can explain, what the opportunity is and how it's working. There's some generic stuff in here preloaded. And then we have a handful of variables that are, unique to each email or each touch point that you can insert however you want in the email. So people are able to do some pretty clever things with this. You can always send yourself a test. And so like real time, you'll get an example of what that email looks like sent to you. Subject. And then the other thing you can customize is the sender profile. So in your inbox, who does it look like the email was sent from? And so when you make a profile, the from name is like the main field. So JH at, Acme Corp or something like that. In most inboxes, that is going to be the thing you see, like who's this email from, and it's from JH or user research at Acme, whatever. Again, is going to be the best experience for your users. Is pretty dependent. Unless you've set up a domain, all the emails are going to come from research@userinterviews.com. But we know that people who are really invested in having the best experience for their users like to configure it so that we can send through their domain so that it actually shows up as, research@acme.com or whatever, the right email would be for your team. And so to do that, you have to go into the domain settings. I'll show that in a second. But yeah, there's all these different emails you can customize. And then within the project, there's a handful. So after somebody applies and you approve them to schedule, you can customize that email. We automatically send confirmations and reminders once they have a time slot selected. And again, you can customize those to make sure they have whatever details they need. If we're paying the incentive, you can customize that to make sure, it's, again, explaining the gift or the monetary compensation in the way that you want. And yeah, so there's a handful of those. Let me jump back to the domain stuff since we're on emails. So basically, this is going to, involve somebody who has access to your domain. So usually somebody in an IT role or a technical role. But if you come through and say you want to add, you just type in the, domain you want to add. Oh, should have thought about that. I'll do my personal.
I actually just pulled stats on the success rate of invites sent from authenticated domains. And I forget the percentage difference, but those invites perform meaningfully better than invites that we send out.
Yeah, it definitely helps. It's hard to come up with a test domain on the fly here. Let's see if this one. I can't use public domains. Killing me. Let me try this. Sorry, everyone.
This is real life, JH. We all run into bugs sometimes.
Well, I guess I don't have a good fake domain to use. But if you've ever done anything with domains, you're going to get some records that have to be added to your DNS provider. So again, it's kind of technical, a little in the weeds. If you're able to pull in an IT person or somebody from your technical team, it's very, very simple. It's basically they have to copy and paste these two kind of randomly generated records, add it to your domain, and all that does is give us permission to send, and it looks like it's coming from whatever preface you want. So you could say Tucker Research, whoever, at whatever your domain is, .com. And so to Tucker's point, we've seen that gets a much better response rate and engagement, and is really helpful to make it look real and authentic when reaching out to your users. And again, sorry for the hiccup here in the demo environment, but it's one of those things that like you can just put in your domain, it'll give you the values, reach out to somebody in your team in IT or on the engineering side, and they'll know what to do with it, and it'll take them like 5 minutes, and then it should be all set up 30 minutes later. So it's one of those things it feels a little confusing, but it's actually really quick and easy to get set up, provided you have somebody in your team who's willing and able to add records to your domain and update some DNS settings. But very common if you use any other kind of mail merge tools, MailChimp, Autopilot, things like that. Same type of experience.
Last thing we wanted to cover, JH, was the custom data consent form.
Yeah, so this basically adds a checkbox that your users have to review and consent to before they can enter the system. And so if that's them coming through the opt-in form, if that's them applying directly to a project, kind of whatever the entry point, this is going to be presented to them. And how you need to word it or phrase it is obviously going to be highly specific to your team and whatever regulatory requirements you need to adhere to or whatever your legal department wants. But the general gist is usually something along the lines of, it's okay to notify me for studies based on the data I've given you. So it's kind of just like acknowledging that I'm giving you personally identifying information, and I am okay with you using that information to target me for research opportunities. And so I'll just put in kind of the stock example here, but you can see that it basically is going to put a checkbox like experience like this, kind of terms and conditions type of thing, onto every page that your users are going to encounter. So if I go back to the opt-in form and refresh it, you'll see now that this just gets automatically appended, and I actually can't submit if that's not checked. It's going to give me an error. So it's going to give me an error because email, but it also will tell you that you have to accept that. So it's one of those things that depending on your organization and kind of the maturity and the compliance and regulatory things you need to be mindful of. One of those things that is super useful to set up and start collecting. And then if you change it or whatever, we know like which version each participant accepted. And so if Tucker had previously accepted this and I came through and edit the legal language to be different, the next time he applies, we're going to represent it to him. It'll show the latest and make sure that he consents now to the latest version before he's able to move forward and join another project. So again, a useful thing depending on your team situation. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to suggest how you write it, but the one thing that I'll speak to that I think is really useful is I like to, and I do this like on userinterviews.com, is like I like to have one project that I just kind of leave open. And so I usually name it in some way, like, continuous research. And what I mean by this is I'll have this all set up. I'll, make sure all my emails are customized and kind of the way I want. I have my Zoom link in there for everyone who's confirmed, stuff like that. And then what's really nice is like we have a Slack channel where people can give us feedback on the product, things like that. If I find somebody that I want to talk to, all I have to do is come in here, grab my link, make sure I have enough availability. I usually just set this really high so that I don't hit the limit. I come through, look at my calendar. I usually have it synced or whatever, and I can just make sure that it's up to date with when I want to talk to people. And then I just send people that link and they just schedule. It's like, it's getting analogous to kind of like Calendly or experiences like that, except that if I had a screener survey, I get to see whatever they answered. They go right into my flow with all my automations. I can pay them an incentive right out of here. So a trick I like to do is just to kind of have one ongoing project that is maybe like 30 minutes with my standard configuration. And I won't use that for like formal projects. If we're going to do, you know, a real study where we need to talk to 5 to 10 people in a small window, I'll set up a new project and do that in a more thoughtful way. But it's really helpful for me to just have a link that whenever, you know, somebody mentions something to support and they say, hey, this person has feedback, and I'm like, hey, send them my link. I'll talk to them. I find that to be one of the easiest ways to take advantage of it. And then again, you get all of that contact history into the CRM so that if Tucker was about to reach out to that same person tomorrow, he's aware that, you know, I just invited them or scheduled them for something. So that's one tip that maybe is not super obvious, but is something that I find helpful.
Hub is such a powerful tool and a bit more complicated than our core recruit tool. So it's great to dive deep and look at all the dynamic filters, labels, inputs, exports, etc.
Yeah. You know, it's something that we've been evolving for a while and we use a lot ourselves. So if you have other questions or, you know, need help getting started with it later, just reach out to, you know, me or Tucker, JH at User Interviews, Tucker at User Interviews. We'd be happy to, you know, to assist and help. And, you know, we'd love to hear your feedback or experiences with it if you get a chance to check it out and take it for a spin.
Absolutely. I always give JH all the feedback that we get across the board. Lucky to have them.
Yeah.
Thanks all for joining this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us. Hope this was helpful. And like I said, if you have questions or need help with anything else, just shoot us a note after, and happy to help.